So after the cancellation of The Acolyte, we have been anxiously awaiting public statements from Amandla Stenberg, who starred in the show, as well as Leslie Headland, who wrote the show. And finally, the day has come. It's glorious. She has posted an 8-minute long response to the entire situation using so many buzzwords that I got whiplash. It was everything you expected to be and more. We're not going to watch the whole thing because that would just be inhumane.
I do want to point out before we get started and watch this, before she gives you all of the buzzwords and directs you to a narrative that says that this is the fault of alt-right Yahtzees who just wanted to be racist, or what she called hyper-conservative bigotry, I want to let you in on some facts. First things first, this show cost $630,000 per minute of screen time, and that the viewership dropped off a cliff after episode 2. There are no plans to remove it from Disney Plus, but the fact of the matter here is that it wasn't alt-right bigotry or Yahtzees. It wasn't internet drama. It was the fact that normies didn't show up to Disney Plus to watch this show.
$630,000 per minute is nasty work. How is that even possible? This has to be money laundering.
It feels that way.
Like, she was the victim of a money laundering campaign.
Yep.
She was not clued into what was going on. Okay, so first off, she says when she found out, she wasn't shocked at the show getting canceled. And here's who she blames.
So we're
the alt-right Yahtzees and their hatred.
Here we go, guys.
I want to acknowledge and I want to show appreciation and love and support for. So that's why I'm hopping on here to talk about this, which is that our Star Wars show has been canceled. And I'm gonna be transparent and say that it's not a huge shock for me. Of course, I live in the bubble of my own reality, but for those who aren't aware, there has been a rampage of vitriol that we have faced since the show was even announced, when it was still just a concept and when no one had even seen it. And that's when we started experiencing a rampage of, I would say, hyper-conservative bigotry and vitriol, prejudice, hatred, and hateful language towards us.
I got a question. Just on its face, how do you define hyper-conservative bigotry, and how does that differentiate from like regular bigotry?
It's like when the bigotry is extra, extra bad.
Yeah.
That's what that means.
Like, do you think that she's going to copyright us on this?
Oh, I hope not. You can't copyright it if it's not a diss track, right?
Like she can only do it if it's on the diss
So
track?
after this, she talked about how she was morally obligated to twerk and in response to all of the hatred.
When I saw that,
to honor her ethical code.
let's what were her exact words? They were, honor my sense of ethics.
Yes.
That's what she says. Here we go.
A lot for me, a lot socio-political dynamics, a lot about my own value system, how I respond to that kind of hatred, how I move through the world at large. And it just became inarguable for me at a certain point that in order to continue to be myself, I would have to honor my value system by being vocal even within the context of working for Disney and working within the large,
I did this once when I was a child, where I had to go to a funeral, and I was really young, and I told my dad that I didn't want to wear a suit because it wasn't really me.
It just wasn't true to yourself.
It wasn't true to myself. So because I was a child, that's different, right?
That flies when you're a child, not when you are in your 20s and have the opportunity to star in a show that cost a mega corporation over $100 million, almost $200 million.
Here's the other thing about this is like, this could have been a fantastic time for pushing back on the things that you believe happened and doing some honest self-reflection. Now, you could talk about the perceived bigotry online, though I would argue that 90% of that was people saying that the writing is garbage and the acting is lifeless, which has nothing to do with race, gender, sexuality, any of that stuff. But people like when people take responsibility for things. They do. People have a natural inclination to give leeway and see the good side of someone when they're willing to own up to when something doesn't work, right? Think of what happened when they were making Sonic and they released that abominable trailer that had that hellscape of a Sonic.
Yes.
And everyone said, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. My eyes are being like pulled from their eye sockets with awfulness.
Yes.
And they're like, the director's like, okay, we're going to go back and we're going to do something about it. Sonic 3 is about to come out and the trailer is good. It has a fan base behind it. People like the character.
And a spin-off show.
And a spin-off show. People like it when you own up to things that don't go well, especially when it's regards to public perception.
And
right?
when you
We're not
listen
talking about
to critique.
Yes, when you listen to critique. We're not talking about your actions in private. We're talking about interpretations of art that's corporate made, costs millions of dollars. It's not an insult to your character to say this art is bad. It's to say something went wrong, the show didn't work, we could have done better in certain respects. You will get way more respect back from your audience if you take that approach. She doesn't do that in this at all. She spends the entire time focusing on the perceived bigotry of people who dare question her show.
Right. Well, these types, they never learn.
Yeah.
I don't know
What does it mean to say...
who expected her to take any responsibility, but these woke people never learned their lesson. And they take pride in that.
Like, what does it mean when she says, honor my sense of ethics? I would ask her, what does that mean?
Twerking. That's what that means.
What does that mean? Like, I guess it's the concept of speaking out against hate.
Twerking and rapping about slavery. That is what that means.
It comes off as morally superior.
Of course.
It comes
because
off
she
as self-obsessed.
believes she is morally superior to everyone who disliked the show.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's such a... if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all mindset, which is made for kindergartners, and you're supposed to graduate out of that and be able to take constructive criticism and naturally have the ability to discern what is constructive criticism and what is insults. Yeah. Everyone can tell the difference between those two things.
A pragmatic worldview would have been best in this respect, right? The audience wasn't there. Nobody watched past episode 2. Ask the question why.
Well, ironically,
according to her, all of the bigotry started before they were even cast, when the show was even announced, right? So if the bigotry started before the show even came out, why was there even high viewership in episodes 1 and 2? Theoretically, there shouldn't have been any viewership.
Well, then she would say it's hate watching.
Oh,
and review bombing. Okay. Yeah. So, ironically, Amandla Stenberg lives in an echo chamber herself because she's grown up in Hollywood. She has been an actress for years since she was a child. She's a Nepo kid. And she lives in the epitome of a liberal echo chamber. But she is telling the fans who didn't like The Acolyte that they actually live in an echo chamber and they were allowing social media to confirm their biases against the show.
Okay. Look, I think that there is something to be said sometimes that some people, like, my guess would be, like, if that's true, it's that they read a bunch of stuff about it and then just didn't try it at all. But I refuse to believe it. What she's saying is that you read a bunch of stuff before it and then watched it and then
I'm not saying that doesn't apply to anyone, but it is the pot calling the kettle BIPOC.
Correct. Here we go. That was so good. Hold on, we're loading.
Amandla's thinking about what she wants to say.
She is. Hold on, let's refresh.
She rarely does that.
But I'll continue to process this for a long time. But maybe the last thing I want to say on the subject is that we all exist in the context of all in which we live. But I'm serious. It's not lost on me how the way that these events have unfolded is also due to the hyper-divisiveness of the time that we live in that is driven, I would say at this point, by echo chambers of thought and algorithms that reinforce our biases. And I think that applies to everybody. But I think that in a particular sect of people, it manifests as a lot of fear for what is changing and a lot of hatred for anything that is other.
I agree
She's talking about the making of a fucking Star Wars show like it is culturally as much of a shift as like the abolition.
I agreed with the first half of what she said on its face. I disagree and reject the notion that it has anything to do with Star Wars. People do have their own worldview spewed back at them every day through algorithms. That's 110% correct. But people tried the show. People turned it on.
Babe. Like,
people
that's
turned
you.
it on. People watched it, and then people didn't come back for more.
Echo chamber happened to you.
I literally wrote down, I was like, she has this fantasy of overcoming odds and oppressors. Dude, you're just an actor who made a show that people didn't like.
No lessons were learned, clearly. She is delusional. She's throwing a tantrum. And,
also, here's the thing. She talks about how she went through like the fan art and the engagement with fans about people who were like really passionate about the series. This is the problem, is that the hyper like online super big fanboys of projects aren't the ones that keep them on air. Even like old network television shows that are still on have like stan accounts related to them. That's not what drives those shows to remain on air. It's the normies who show up week in and week out.
We read the Acolyte fan fiction. It was not anything that's making money for Disney.
Yeah. If there was these legions of online support, why didn't it translate to a season 2 renewal? Because it's not about the online support. It's about normie support. You don't need legions of online fans. You need normies who have no idea that any of this is going on to say, that was fun.
And none of your IRL friends recommended watching The Acolyte. That's the truth.
It's true. And it's just one of those things where when I see this, I do agree with her about the part about our worldviews being shown back at us. And it does kind of reinforce our own biases. But I would have also liked you to say, you know what? Maybe that's kind of true. But also, the writing wasn't there. It didn't seem to resonate with people in the way that we hoped that it would. Clearly, the viewership numbers bear that out.
Yeah.
Maybe if we had done something different, we would have found a way to connect with people.
Nope. No humility. None whatsoever.
A little bit of humility goes a long way in situations
Maybe Leslie
like this.
Headland will. I mean, we heard from people who worked with her that she used to be a reasonable person, at least. Maybe this will be a wake-up call for the person who wrote and created this show, at the very least. He has more investment in it.
You're just never going to get people on your side by blaming the rest of the world for when your when PCC eventually gets canceled. I'm going to blame all of you for not watching more.
In a video where I'm braiding my hair.
No, I wouldn't be braiding my hair though. I would be trimming my beard.
Yes.
I'll be
something random like that.
I'll be shaving and I'll be like, if you guys' fault. You should have watched more. You should have paid closer attention. You should have contacted my boss and said you really love it. Like, no, if it doesn't survive, it's your own responsibility. It's not the responsibility of the people watching. The term "the customer's always right" may be a bit of a like a catch-all phrase, but it's especially true in the media, meaning that the customer is always in charge. They should be. Like, if they're not watching, there's no reason. You could make the argument that still to this day that they're greenlighting a lot of projects and a lot of stuff is being subsidized because of ideology. Well, that can only go on for so long. Clearly. Right. This show is full of it. If that was true, if it was true that all they cared about was ideology, they would just keep greenlighting it and they would just give it another season. But what does that matter if nobody's watching it?
The word is overused, but shows that are woke have a very short shelf life. And then they reach their expiration date and all of these passionate fans come out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
And they say, like, what happened? Why can't we have anything good? This is why we can't have nice things, is because you just don't support creativity.
I've loved
And it's like, oh, so you suddenly showed up to like actually care about this show.
I love
that no one was watching.
There's been a trend going around on. You're right. You're 100% right. Like there's a trend going around where they're doing that same statement with like movies where it's like over the weekend it was like it's like Everyone complains that all we get is corporate slop, and then a totally original movie like The Crow comes out. No one goes to see it. You've got nobody to blame but yourself for reboots and sequels.
So true.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.